Welcome to Purpose Driven Sobriety. So, first, I would like to thank the beautiful lady that's sponsoring this episode. Her name is Nikki Popko. She is a dear friend to those of us in recovery, and I'm so grateful that she sponsored this episode for us. So, welcome to Purpose Driven Sobriety. I'm Christine, and I'm an alcoholic. I have been blessed with the gift of sobriety since March 14, 2012, and for that I am eternally grateful. And I have a friend on with me today, Mr. Chad. And Chad hails from North Carolina, and I met Chad through a online recovery group page that he admin or moderator. He's in there. He's one of the big wigs, and was very kind and saw the benefit of what this crazy Waco, Texas girl's trying to do with this and try to reach that person who's still suffering. So without further ado, Chad, thanks for coming on with me. That just really just warms my heart. We had a good conversation the other day just to see if this is something that you wanted to do, and you were brave enough to come on. So thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm very pleased to be here. Yeah, it's been a journey, that's for sure.
It has. So tell me about this. Let's start back. So how long? You've got 2 years, right? What's your sobriety?
I've been without alcohol in my life for just about 2 years. It's been a good 2 years. 2 years I never thought would ever come back in the midst of the storm of life, so to speak. For me, it just kind of creeped up on me.
So tell me. So usually when we come on, we share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. So that someone had asked me before we started this, who is your audience? And my goal is to speak to that person who is still suffering, who still thinks that there is no solution, there's no hope. So I'm interested to hear what it was like for you, what happened, and what your life is like now.
Great. Yeah. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and I'll do my very best to do it justice. So for me, I'll kind of start out, I guess, from the beginning, because that's kind of where it all began. I grew up, a regular kid. I thought, a family of, 4 kids. I'm the oldest, and through my younger years, I realized that things at my home weren't as what we would call normal compared to my friends, and so I began to understand that my mom was a victim of her own addiction, and it was something she was pretty outgoing, or at least vocal about. There were a lot of failed attempts at getting clean, and so as a kid it was hard. I didn't understand addiction. All I knew was I don't want to be like that.
Right.
And so there was a lot of a lot of damage that was done with the kids, and we worked hard to kind of rally around each other and be that support. And I guess in my 20s I started to understand it a little bit more. I got married and started having my own family, and I think I began to delve a little deeper into addiction because I wanted a relationship with my mom. And
so you were trying to understand more about addiction at that point in time?
Correct.
Got it.
I was kind of thrust into that position of I was the peacemaker. I'm the oldest of 4
wow.
kids. We had the interventions, and there was the rehabs, and all the things that the world says is the right things to do when you're facing addiction, and nothing ever really seemed to work. And so I began to develop my resentments at that point in my life, especially to my mom, some to my dad, even being, blaming him for not, how can you not fix this? Why, you love her. Why don't you make it better?
Oh, wow.
And, in our own feeble way, we don't know any different. We don't know all, so And so for me that, I had made a decision early on that I was, I won't be like her. And I guess, I was pretty good at keeping to that promise. I guess like most kids, I experimented a little in high school, and we'd find some beers or something to smoke or something. But I was pretty good. I didn't really go down that trail, and other than just some experimentation. And I found myself, in my 20s and like I said, married, and the kids were starting to come, and my life was, by all intents and purposes, I was just living the American dream. I've got the wife and kids, and striving for all the things that we wanted in life. And then it's kind of like that old saying, you want to give God a good laugh, just tell him what your plans are. um so for me it really crept up on me. I didn't realize until long after the fact, in the last 3 or 4 years of just really trying to take personal responsibility of my own life, that I was contributing to some real deep brokenness in my marriage.
Mm.
And it was my insecurities, and the lack of dealing with childhood trauma. And I guess, if I'm honest, I was never completely vulnerable, not even with my ex-wife. Constantly having to guard our hearts and not let the people in that can hurt
Mm.
us or tell us that we're doing things that are wrong. And so it was kind of a slow fade. I woke up one day and my life was kind of in chaos, and the marriage was crumbling, and I've got 3 young children who don't know what's going on. And and that's where it really got bad for me, Kristen. I was just, I was kind of this prideful man who, yeah, I was at that point was going to counseling and submitted to some leadership in the church. And I just wanted things to be different. And that's really when the addiction kind of caught up with me.
So
um,
how much were you drinking at that point in time?
I started off, I think it was around 2011 was when this really started going south for me. And I started drinking. I was a very casual drinker up until that point. I might have a couple beers on the weekends. If I went out with my grandparents, we might split a pitcher of beer over a couple pizzas, stuff like that.
Normal.
And I began to drink more at home. My kids never saw it. My ex never really saw it. And I think it was just, we'd had some trauma in the marriage, that I just couldn't deal with, and it was really hard for me. Um, and so I kind of just became a recluse, and I started shutting in, and I thought, that no one will understand. There's so much shame here. I'm a successful guy. I volunteer my time. I'm involved in church. Like, I'm hitting all the boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got this big elephant in the room, which was a marriage that was pretty much shattered by betrayal. And
Wow. And what is it that said, in at least in recovery, secrets make you sick, and we
they
just get
do. And
sicker and
so
sicker.
I just, I began to drink and kind of cope with that. And, it was hard because I felt like I was on an island. I didn't really have the support of the pastors of my church and the counseling team that we were, working with there. And I felt like I was really going through the motions. There was always a list, and I was being a people pleaser and somebody very insecure with myself. I was more too happy to jump through all those hoops.
Mm.
Whatever the list is, you need to do this, now you need to do this. And it was just, I was chasing my tail. It was, that was the first time I really got introduced to the effects of kind of what a gaslighting can be
Right.
with someone. And so I kind of got it trained into myself that I wasn't supposed to talk about these things. I wasn't supposed to make any accusations. I just needed to put my head down, work hard, and be a dad and the best husband I could. And so I did. And just focused on my career and work. And I missed so many opportunities. And but each night I would come home and I was just empty. And so I began to drink in secret, and hiding the bottles, and really trying to deaden the pain, just because I wanted to be able to sleep at night.
Right.
Is
Have some kind of
that's what
peace.
did it. I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to sleep. And so I really spent about a decade like that. It was very bingy for me. I didn't, it never, alcohol never affect my, to my knowledge, it never affected my relationships with people outside of my home. It didn't affect my work. I never had that moment that so many of my brothers and sisters out there can relate to, where it was, I woke up, in a jail cell
Or
or
under a
in the
bridge or
hospital.
mhm.
Yeah, I didn't have that super, like, aha moment. Mine was a real slow fade. We had talked earlier about the slow cooker. That's what
Yeah,
mine
yeah.
was.
In our conversation, we talked about the microwave or the crock pot. Well, and that's what I think it's real important that people know that rock bottom does not necessarily mean under a bridge. Rock bottom can mean that the inner turmoil and the hell that you're in just between your own two ears. I mean, just in existing, the bottoms are not the same for everybody that's in trouble. So just because you haven't lost your job and been to jail or have DWIs or whatever doesn't mean that you don't have a massive problem. So only the individual can diagnose themselves, if you will. But so were your parents still active in your life at that point in time?
I think so. I mean, we lived fairly close, same county, pretty close to one another. I had gone through, I never would confide the important things in my life with my mother. I just, there was a lot of broken trust
Sure.
over the years. And I guess to a degree there still is. But I've worked really hard, and, and having and I can hit on that maybe a little bit later, but, yeah, my folks were there. I did confide in my father, who is, one of my greatest champions in life, and we have a great relationship. And, so to be able to go to your own dad, and somebody who's kind of like Superman, you look at him, and I looked at him to him for so many things in my life. And so to be able to go to him as a man in my 30s, my late 30s, like, I and to share with him, like, hey dad, I'm dealing with this thing, and it's in my marriage. And, the woman of my youth, who I, met in high school, we're not working well anymore. And
Right.
we've both made mistakes. And, to be able to do that was hard. I think it was the beginning for me of what would eventually take several more years to heal. But, it's that adage of, I have to admit to myself and one other person there's
Right.
something wrong here.
It's
And
ironic that it
so,
was your dad initially, though, because if what I heard you saying earlier was what now, and maybe I misunderstood. So, was your dad an enabler with your mom, or was he just kind of holding on for the ride? Kind of, I mean, we know how we can
I
be.
looking back on it, and I've had the opportunity to have some really frank conversations with my dad since then. So I think, yes, my dad is definitely has been. I wouldn't say necessarily that's happening now, but for most of my life, he was the textbook enabler. It was, and I could relate, because I think I took on many of those characteristics in my own life and in my marriage, where I just wanted peace. I was willing to sacrifice a whole lot of good things in order to get that peace, and it wasn't even really peace to begin with. So yes, my dad was in his own way, was, part of the problem for me, I guess, but not in a resentful way. i
Right.
never I never resented my father. And, as time would prove later, I really was able to, at some point, have tremendous empathy for my dad,
That's
and to
amazing.
know how difficult that situation is, and how really there's, we don't have any control over anyone, um, especially our spouse.
Hmm.
We we can seek to have good influence on them, and let them have that influence on us, and that's how, in a healthy way, that's how things work. But
Right.
so I did reach out to my dad, and I did tell him, and, to be able to look your dad in the eye and have that courage and say, pops, I'm like, it's not going well. And, to tell your dad, hey, I failed as a dad. I failed as a husband. I've had bad things done to me too, and, like, to tell my dad, like, that my wife was having an affair was really
Man, you
difficult for
really had
me.
to bring, yeah, that took a lot of courage. Now, did you share with him that how much you were drinking and all of that at the time, or just the problems that were going on in your life?
So I began to tell him, and I was a little, I guess, naive and blind to a lot of the depth of it. But I was also getting it. I was getting from my ex, even at the, when we were married. You need to stop drinking. You're drinking too much, and here I am over here saying, well, it's your fault. If you wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't be in this position. That's how we blame shift. That's how we live in this powerful thing called denial, which I think is more powerful than heroin
Mhm.
at times. I mean, I don't have any experience with heroin, and I'm sure you'll have some guests that do, but denial is a powerful force. And I was there. I was in my fog. I was comfortable. I had control over it. So on one hand, I'm reaching out for help and saying, "Hey, this is what's going on." But on the other side of the token, I have control over it. As bad as it is, I kind of know what to expect, and so I've learned to mitigate through those things in my life. And it just made it worse. It like in my own feeble way, I was focusing so much on the marriage and the relationship because in my life and the way I was raised, it's mom and dad need to be healthy. They need to be a good example to the kids. They need to be providers. All the things that we know to be true about family and community that are good.
Mhm.
And here it was all in jeopardy with me. I was watching the woman that I loved like disassociate herself from me and detach herself, and it was a roller coaster. It was during the week it was really hard. We'd go about our days. I'd go to work, she'd go to work, blah blah blah, and we would pass each other and barely speak. And then by the time the weekends would roll around, we'd be thrust into, okay, we're off, we need to spend time, and it would actually be a lot of times good, but that was the
Because it
roller
was
coaster
busy
we lived.
stuff, the kids and games and where they need to be, and you just,
it,
yeah.
yeah, there was that element of it, and then and the devil's in the details, so you find out a lot after the fact. But for me, to be able to have those conversations with my ex at some point, and just frankly ask, why was it like that? And you find out all the reasons why later.
Mhm.
It was really hard. I think for us to have that roller coaster really was, during the week there was anonymity for her. She could live and do whatever she wanted because there was no accountability. And to be engaged in a relationship with someone else has a whole lot of consequences for other people too.
Sure.
And so that's where it was like, basically she was home on the weekends and there was no contact with anyone but me. And so we were able to kind of be back into that position, like, okay, we're married, let's figure this out. But once Monday rolled around and then there was another person and an influence in that, it was like being
Detached.
in this pit of detachment. And so,
Mm.
and I couldn't handle it. I couldn't deal with it. I think deep down I knew what was going on. I knew the truth, but I was so trained to not ask and not question that I just lived oblivious for so long. And I began to drink more and more and more. And so I would have these binges where, you know, whiskey was my drink. I loved it. And I thought that it loved me back, but in reality, that's the lie, right?
Mhm.
You hear that. I describe it. It's like a siren calling your name from the shore, and you just, you know, you don't know what to do, but you know that if I bury my head in that bottle for a little while, then I could at least escape enough to go to sleep,
It's a
and
solution.
maybe tomorrow
Mhm.
will be better. And
Mhm.
tomorrow's never got better. They just got worse. And so I found myself into that slow fade of fatherhood and being a husband and being a son and a friend and a boss, and all the titles and hats that I wore. I wasn't mastering any of them. I was barely getting by,
Right.
and the people in my life were suffering because of my choices.
Wow, that's such a lonely feeling, even to be surrounded by all kinds of people, to just feel so isolated. Yeah, that's, man. So what happened?
So I had a kind of an aha moment, I guess. We've so many people in these situations, and I hope that this is, if there's someone out there listening who's stuck in that, that pit of despair, and they don't know what, I can barely even think about tomorrow, let alone, whether I'm going to be successful. Like, there's hope, because, for me, I trudged along through this, for several years, and I think it was the beginning of 2019. I had that moment where, I was had gotten into a big confrontation with my ex, and we weren't fighting a lot. I mean, we were relatively peaceful. We just didn't coexist very well together. But we had a moment in it, and it was an argument, and as a result of that, there was a request that we separate, and I agreed, like, okay, and we did, and it was in the home. It was weird, but that was the first time I actually wanted to take control of my life, and I didn't know how, but I wanted to change. And so I had reached out to two people, two friends, lifelong. One's a lifelong friend. She's the closest thing I have to a big sister,
Mm.
and just love her dearly. Her name's Dana, and I reached out to Dana that day, and I reached out to a couple other friends that were married, that were kind of involved with me and my wife, and and they both had the exact same thing to say, and they said, we think you should reach out and go talk to someone, get some professional help, at least get a consult. And the coolest thing, Kristen, was they both recommended the exact same guy. They don't know each other. This was a man who was in my hometown, and he was a psychologist, from a Christian perspective. And I went and saw him, and I made a decision in that very moment that I wasn't going to talk about my marriage or what was going on with her. I wanted to look at my own self and take responsibility for my life.
Wow. That's
And so
huge. That's huge
that began
to get off that blame train. That's huge. That's
it
hard to
was big.
do. That mirror,
Um,
man. Oof. Yeah.
so he and I talked to him about the alcohol. I wasn't sure. It's like, I knew I had examples in my life. My grandparents, on my dad's side, were alcoholics, and I never experienced anything negative with them. I'd heard stories about, how volatile things were with them, especially before, when my dad and his sibling were younger. And so I never experienced it. I just knew him as grandma and grandpa, and they were a safe place for me. But I I was being exposed to that, and how this is generational, and how we have, we have these tendencies based on things completely out of our control. One of those
Mhm.
is just our genetics. It's the way the way we were born. And so I began to talk to the doctor about that. And so, he asked me some questions. We went through some pretty serious, you know, personal inventory at that point for me. And I made a decision to abstain from alcohol. And I didn't do it through the steps. I didn't do it for any other reason that I thought, like, if this is really an issue, let's take that off the table and focus on the things that are really important. And so that was my hope. It didn't go the way that I had intended to, but I did abstain from alcohol for about a year, on my own. It wasn't as hard as I had thought it was going to be, but there were moments in that where there were definitely temptations, and I definitely realized that I had become dependent on alcohol to run to alcohol when life was hard.
So when you said it didn't go the way you thought it would, what do you mean by that?
So I had some great personal triumphs in that with my own stuff, but it didn't affect the marriage necessarily. Things weren't getting better in that way. Um, which I guess is all part of the plan. It all had to happen the way it did. We were still living, I guess, actively, with this big secret in the marriage. And I guess I kind of knew it, and she probably kind of knew I knew it, but we never talked about it. She was still actively involved with someone else. And, And I got to that point where it's like, okay, well, if that's the way it's going to be, I can't control it. I need to learn how to be the best version of me. And so it took some time, and so what I mean by things not ending the way that it was less than a year before we were really separated and on the path to divorce. And I remember waking up one morning after that, and going to my psychologist, and I broke down. I was kind of in tears. I was mourning the loss of something that I wanted really bad. I had worked really hard, and I said, doc, this has all been in vain. All the things I've learned, all of the things about myself, about addiction, about my own personality, about trauma, all of it's been in vain. And he looked me in the eyes and said, you were assuming that all of these benefits were for her sake, and they're not. They were for you and for the life that God has for you now. And it really changed my attitude.
Wow.
I
Well,
began to
I think a lot of people when they get into recovery by whatever means, seem they um think that things will automatically go back to the way they're supposed to be, or there's going to be rainbows and puppy dog toes, and it's like, okay, well, we forget, most of us, at least I would say, forget the damage that either we did or that was done to us, that it just doesn't just go away because we put the drink down and start to do some work. And that's where I think it's important to recognize the taking it, one day at a time, obviously, but sometimes 1 minute at a time, and just taking life as it is. But so tell me
yeah,
what happened after that. So your mom and dad still in the picture at that point in
yeah,
time,
yeah.
and
This was right at the very, so this all happened. It was in 2020. It was right when COVID started to really
oh
start to destroy people and to really take its toll on people. And I'm kind of in a unique situation. I had a really good job. I was working at a conference center, and as a chef, and as one of the guys that was training all the new staff, and I loved my job. And but then COVID hit, and so simultaneously, I'm separated from my wife and my kids. I'm living in the house that all lived in, together, and I still have this job, but now we're on furlough because no one can come and be around anyone. So the very essence of my job is, like, we can't even, we're in the hospitality industry, so
right.
we can't see people. And so I look back at it now and say, COVID and how it destroyed so many people and it made things so difficult. For me, it was a blessing because I was furloughed from work. I was able to, keep my job and know that I would have it when I was able to come back to it. And not only that, financially, I was just blessed to be, to fully get paid during this time and to be able to travel and to really go find myself.
Wow.
And so that's what I did. I got on an airplane. I grew up in San Diego, and I got on an airplane and flew out to Florida for the first time. And, I have a few family out there, and I thought, what, maybe I just need a change of scenery. And so that's basically what I was able to do over the next, 8 or 9 months. I was able to make the plans that I needed to, and I moved out to Florida in the beginning of 2021. Um, and that's when my life really just started to change for the good. I enrolled in a program. It's called Life Skills. I can't speak. It's as important as any program I've been through, and I really, and basically the gist of that program is to just go back and deal with your childhood trauma. Why am I the way I am? Why do I think the way I think? What life commandments do I believe to be true about me that are not true? The things that I believe to be true. And I lived accordingly. And I put myself into a real small box because of that, my way of thinking. And so I was able to strip away all of that. I was able to, to write a couple letters to the people, including my mom, that I wanted to, express that, how hard things were, and to really my way of saying, okay, I want a boundary. What is a boundary? How do I know what they are, and why do I need them in my life? And so that was the beginning for me to really understand that we can heal through these things, and we can. The minute I stopped thinking of myself so highly, I began to see others for the value that they are. And
So,
so
so that like now, did you during that time were you able to come to an now? Are you of an opinion that alcoholism addiction is a disease?
absolutely.
Okay, so
um
my question to you at that point, Chad, did you come to a better understanding of your mom and her disease at
I
that
did.
point? And
I
it's
did.
like an empathy, to where it's like, oh shit, I know now. I see that maybe I think what I'm trying to say is, could you see her and the disease as two separate things? See
I,
past the disease.
I was, as a matter of fact, and it really opened my eyes to really absolutely seeing things with empathy. I lived with these, and I think we talked about this at one point. I lived with these strong, between these two strong pillars of idealism. The things that I thought were, whether that's political, religious, all the things that I think are really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side was ignorance. I was just totally ignorant, and so addiction was one of those things that I had made a stereotype based on my life circumstances with my mom and others. And I thought I had no understanding of it. So I began the process of learning, and it's like, okay, so am I an alcoholic? Do I need to, like, how do I figure that out? And so that, along with a couple really significant life moments, one of them specifically was, I was new to Florida. I just moved there, and I was asked by a family member to to sail a boat across the Gulf of Mexico, to deliver this sailboat.
Now,
They
my
asked me
husband,
to
I told my husband about that story, and he said, "What kind
be.
of boat was it?" So I know that Rick is going to be listening to this at some point in time. So, what kind of boat was it?
So for the life of me, I don't remember. It
Oh,
was a
you're going to break his
sailboat.
heart.
It's a sailboat. I'm not a sailor, so
He's
my
a
my
sailor.
my guy. I know the name of the boat, and it's based out of Houston, and it's really cool people that I met as a result of this.
That's amazing.
But they asked me to be the yacht, the chef, and so I had to plan all the meals, and we shopped and we did all this, and I was like, okay, can I do it? Well, I'm up for the challenge, and so it was a life changing event. But what happened on that boat was, watching the sun rise in the morning and chasing it all day and being out in the middle of nowhere, and you're left with your thoughts. And so from somebody like me who never embraced solitude, never embraced being alone, was always wanting to be, that social butterfly and that total extrovert. I think a lot of it was just coping mechanisms on my own
Mm.
end. But needless to say, I'm on this boat, and I had that moment, and there was a song that came on, over somebody's iPod or whatever, and it's a song called "Burn the Ships," and it's from a band called For King and Country. And I'd heard the song on, K Love, or whatever Christian rock, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'd heard it
Such a
many
good
times,
song.
but I never listened to it. And so I listened to it, and I was like, wow, this is powerful. And I began listening to it. And then we got to a point where we were in port for a day or two, and I had the internet. So I started researching the song a little bit, and I realized, like, this is a song that was written, from a man to his wife who was struggling with addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it all seemed to just add, like, all the, the whole story started beginning to take, like, a form for me on this. And so back out on the boat, I'm listening to that song, I'm meditating on it, I'm
So,
praying
what are you
about it.
hearing? Let's back up to the song. What are you hearing in the song? For people that haven't heard the song, what is the story? What's the
Okay.
message?
Yeah. So and it's based loosely on the explorer Cortez from Spain came over to the new, to the Americas, years and years, 1600s, 1500s, I can't remember. I'm not a historian, but the concept of it was, they landed in what we now call Cozumel. It's Mexico. It's the island right off Cancun. Um, and after so many days at sea, and got all these ships and all these men, and they're now getting discontent with their life, and they want to go home. And Cortez did something as radical as anyone has ever done, and he literally set fire to the ships and said, "All right, guys, now that's not even on the table. Go
Make it
get
work.
yourself well.
That's
Go get
right.
content. Go work."
Find a
And it was
life
like,
here.
and so that was like, to me, it hit home. I'm on the Gulf. I'm pointing west. I'm sailing across open blue water, and I know that far out on the distance is my home, is where I grew up. It's on the Pacific Ocean, and so figuratively, I'm looking at all the things that I left behind, the brokenness, the hurt, the things that I had done, the things that were done to me for all these years. And I got to that point for the first time in my life, as I literally watched this ship sailing next to me, right? It's this pretend figurative ship, and I'm casting all these burdens over. Well, I'm going to give up that. I'm going to give up this. All the things that, and what I got to at the end was the most beautiful thing, and it was, Chad, forget about all the things that were done to you. Forget about the way you grew up. Forget about the addiction of your mom. Forget about your ex-wife and the way she hurt you. Forget about all of these things. It's time to look deep into your own life and take responsibility for the things you did.
Wow.
And that simultaneously goes with me not drinking. I had made a decision I was going to abstain from alcohol as I learned about this. And so when I got back to shore after a 3+ week awesome trip across the Gulf of Mexico, I was now in a foreign place. I knew I wanted to live there. I needed to find a job. I didn't have any friends. And the hard work had begun. And so God began to open doors for me. I got a job like within 3 days. It was this awesome, high-paying job, and I started meeting people. And I had given up the alcohol. And so I for me, that last aha moment, and I think I had shared this with you, was I was missing my children. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are adults. One of them is almost 17, so she's my youngest, and she's lives with her mom most of the time, and is really struggling. I was longing for my kids, and I just instinctively went into where I was staying with a family member. I went to the bar. I poured probably 5 fingers of whiskey, and I went out to the lanai because I knew I needed to contemplate some things, and I was feeling sad about my children. And I raised that glass to my lips to take that first drink, and it was almost like God had just spoke to me, and it wasn't in an audible way. I haven't heard the audible voice of God, but he said to me in my own quiet way, was, "Do you love this, or do you love your children and me more? Which is it?" And
Wow.
that was my moment that moved me to tears. I put the glass down. I prayed. I cried. I cried out to God because I wanted my children, and I wanted those around me to know me for who I really am, and not for this mask that I was so easily wearing for all of these years.
Mm.
And so I laid it down, and I, after that, I went, immediately went in looking at some online resources. I was able to reconnect with another friend who had some experience, and so I began going to meetings and working the steps and talking about getting a sponsor, all the things that we do. And at that time, I was like, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. All I know is when I drink alcohol, my life gets unmanageable. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the criteria. It's
Just so
unmanageable
happens. Yep.
when I add alcohol to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've been blessed since then to really, to be able to really dig deep over the last 2 years into the program and the fellowship, the people, the relationships that I've made, and like these are lifelong relationships. and to really take it kind of like that approach of like I've arrived nowhere. Truly, I'm a long way from where I was, and I'm heading to where I need to be. And I think from somebody like me, that's the extrovert, and that's like I think I've realized for the first time in my life over the last few years, how to be content and how to be and how to to have gratitude in everything. One of my mottos that I've started to live by was to be the light. And like we have to be able to take, I think for me at least,
Hmm.
I don't want to keep my struggles and my trials, secret, and my healing isn't in vain. Like there's got to be people out there that can relate, and to know that there's hope. Like there's always hope. I made so many mistakes in dealing with my struggles. And so of all the things, like, people ask me, would you go back, would you trade it? I wouldn't. I still have, my children, they to this day still have no, I mean, I've said things even in this podcast that my children don't even know. Like there's a story out there that they don't have any idea how difficult it was. And for the longest period of time, I thought, oh, if only they knew, if only they knew. And now it's more like it's not even really that important. All we need is a contrast of where we were to where we are.
Hmm.
And so I I've never earned any favor or gotten any more love or acceptance from my children by disparaging anyone, especially their mom, right?
Right.
Like I'm not going to gain their favor by, like, we have as a collective, as a family, we're no longer a family, but we still have family ties that will last forever. And so my kids don't have any idea what that is, and the sacrifices that had to happen. They know the reality of their own hurts and how difficult life was, especially when they say, yeah, dad was drinking. They have those memories of their dad. They don't know why I did it, and it doesn't even matter why. What matters is that I had to come to the point where I could own it and take responsibility for it, and then make the changes to prevent it from happening ever again.
So interesting enough, I had when I first was starting this venture with this podcast, I had posted on social media. I'd said, if you were to ask someone a question, excuse me, on the podcast, what would that be? And I actually wrote yours down and what you had suggested that I had because I just have a sheet that just random questions every now and then, and what you had said was, is there someone that you do you remember what you said to me?
I
What
do, I
what
do.
was it?
I think it was, did you, so you were asking, the context was like, what snags did people perhaps hit in their recovery? I think I got it right, but I think mine was, what challenges, if any, have you had in, making amends?
Yes.
Has anyone rejected your attempt of making an amends? And I say that because it rings very true with me.
So, sir, I ask you that question: is there in moving forward, in recovery, depending upon what route you go, there may come a point in time where you have to go back and make an amends, which an amends is an apology. Basically, it's I'm sorry. This is what I did. Will you forgive me, and how can I make it right? That's a proper amends. So there are occasions where damage has been done and that may not be received. So has that happened to you?
It has. So I went through, like I said, after all of that and really kind of understanding my role and where I really messed up. I think the most important people in my life that I wanted to be able to make an amends was my children. And so the answer to that is yes, I've been able to with one and a half, I guess, of my kids. My middle child is still just very doesn't want to have anything to do with dad, um, and it's hard, but she's not ready. And so I have a story to tell her, and my story to tell her is primarily, wouldn't even really encompass a lot of what we're talking about now. Like, it
Mhm.
needs to be like, sweetheart, this is where I screwed up with you. um and so she hasn't been ready for that. And one day I hope she is. But we know we can't enforce our way and what we want, even though it might be good and healthy. We can't burden others with that unless their heart is open to hear from us.
Right. That can be,
um
yeah, that can be super heartbreaking. I mean, especially
yeah,
when you've done so much soul searching and construction and work on yourself. It's like, okay, damn it, I'm completely different. You come over here and let me show you, let me show you how great, not how great I am, but you know what I'm talking about. How compared to, before, I've come so far. And it's like, we have to respect those people on the path that they're on, and
right.
and find a way to be okay with them not just welcoming us back in with open arms. And that can just be heart-wrenching.
Yeah, I think, I've gone through the gamut of emotions over the years. I've shed enough tears over my children to last lifetimes. And I think those days are pretty much gone. It doesn't mean that I don't still feel and have this just tremendous love for my kids. But I think really accepting, the timing of it all, and really, like, in AA, we talk about a higher power. And for everybody that's different. For me, my higher power is I have a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That's my high power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's what works for me. And that's the way I, in a lot of ways, it was going back to my youth, in the sense of, okay, I'm going to get right, kind of, that saying, I'm going to get right with God. I mean, there's truth to that. And
Right.
so that's been the comfort for me. It's knowing, okay, I know two things in this life that are absolute positive facts. Number one, there is a God. And number two, I am not him. And so I don't know the ways. I don't understand it all the time. I think, I see great traction with my son, and who, I'm working and building, trust and a relationship with him, with his sisters, with my daughters. It's not going like that. And, I think there's more to it. And it's real easy for me to go down the rabbit trail of blame and being a victim again. In those times, I know that their mother, the kid's mom, doesn't really care for me very much. As a matter of fact, she probably hates me. And I accept that. I don't like it. I think that that's where it becomes no longer a problem of mine. It becomes someone else's problem. And so I think there's influence with the kids, and all of that. It doesn't really matter. It's, that saying, and it really hit me hard. Somebody, I think it was on Facebook or something. In the last few years, I read a quote. It said, would you step in front of a bullet or a bus, or would you die for your kids? And I think as parents, we would all pretty easily stand back and say, of course, I would do anything for my kids. But what really hit me the hardest, Kristen, was the challenge. I said, but will you live for them?
Mm.
Will you live for your kids? And so I had to weigh that in through the lens of, well, had I ever really lived for my kids? And in so many ways, I wasn't. I was living to just hold on. I was living to survive. I was living to just get through from one hard thing to the next. And so my kids don't understand that. All they know is dad wasn't really there. He was distracted. He had his eyes on other things. And so, to be the best version of myself, I'm ready for my children the minute they walk into my life. And whether that's for a moment or for an eternity, I will buy those moments up. They're like kisses on the cheek from the Lord. And so, I think with all things, it takes time and consistency. And so I don't have a right to push and enforce what I want onto them. I just don't. So I'm ready. And so it gives me great hope. And in the meantime, what can I do to serve, to be in the service of others? How can I help other people? How can I, tell my story's kind of anticlimactic. Like I said, I don't have this story that of biblical proportions of of this conversion that's magnificent. Mine's pretty regular. And the thing is, I think there's so many men and women out there who live regular lives who get you know they wake up one day and wonder, how in the heck did I get here,
Mm.
and how do I get out of it?
Hmm.
And
Well, and
that's
that's
where
just it. They're living in their own turmoil, and from the outside, everything looks fine, but inside they're just dying. I mean, that's where and that's where with the kids. I too have three children, and biological kids. My husband and I have five together, but of my three bio kids, this addiction roots run real deep. It goes generations back, and that's where I mean, at some point in time, hopefully you'll be able to educate yours as far as guys, you need to be, on guard of because this is in our family, and maybe they'll come to understand the disease of addiction, and be able to separate you from the disease, like you have. So, how's your relationship with your mom today?
I think it's probably better than it's ever been.
Is she still
I
in
still,
active addiction?
you know, I, I don't know, and that's really a really horrible thing to say. I think, I really, I will say this. I think she still has to go through life, and it's frustrating because it's like a lot of people, they start out with, it's like the chicken and the egg, which one came first, to have somebody who has legitimate medical issues and has chronic pain
Mm-hmm.
and has all these things that could in a lot of ways probably contributed to the addiction, the pain meds. And so it's hard. It's like, which came first? And so for me,
Right.
I always lived like living in those ideals for me for so long. It didn't matter to me why. The fact is you're doing it and it's bad and you should not do it. Well, now to be able to have the empathy and to really be able to put myself into that position of what an addict is, and how challenging it is, it's freed me to have a relationship with her that's more meaningful. I still have to have very healthy boundaries with my mom, just like anyone. It's some
Sure.
some people is more challenging than others. And so with my mom, it is very challenging at times to, as far as the way we communicate. I tend to take the approach of, I am going to give my mom my greatest asset, or the commodity that I have that is the most valuable, is my time.
Mm-hmm.
And so who I give that to is up to me. And so I made a decision probably about a year and a half ago that I was going to give my mom more time, even though it's real easy for someone like her to take what I give and want more and more and more and more and more. I've learned to look at just the flattery of that and not look beyond it.
Right.
So it's important for my mom to have a relationship with her son, and so it's important for me to have a relationship with her. But like I said, I have, there's moments where, I will go a week, maybe more, and maybe not be so quick to get back to her because it's a boundary that's important. And there's a bunch of reasons why that would be, but it works.
Right.
And so
You
it's
still
not,
have to take
it's
care of
not,
yourself first.
yeah, my self-care isn't going to get, prioritized or out, like that's always going to have to be at the top of my list. I've realized that's super important. Because without it, I will fall into the trap of having a lot of things potentially in my life that aren't good for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
have to be very disciplined, and I think for me, really, it's about the boundaries, right? I only have a few people in my life that are difficult to have boundaries with, and they're the people that I probably wouldn't choose to have a relationship with if I was walking down the street,
Sure.
but because they're family, um, I'm willing to work harder at that, and to just let things happen the way they are and not take things so personally.
Wow,
Um,
that's big.
Yeah, there's been a lot of programs for me. Look, like AA has taught me a whole lot about, just kind of dealing with life on life's terms. Um, to not get too high, not get too low. But there's been other programs that, like I said, the life skills was huge, and probably just as equal was I went through it. I wanted to learn about domestic violence. I really didn't understand. I mean, there's we hear about it and we see things. Growing up, I saw physical altercations as a child, between people I love that love me, that like I shouldn't have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Right, my children saw that type of stuff, behavior between mom and dad, whether it's yelling at each other or worse.
Right.
And I didn't know, like, why am I in this position? I've experienced a lot of that, and what I realized along the way was that I was guilty of several of those areas of domestic violence in the way that I would manipulate and kind of control things, and that can be abusive as
Well, yeah. So,
well. And so
domestic violence is not raising a hand necessarily. Just raising a hand is what you're. Yeah, is what
correct,
I hear you saying. It's way more than that.
correct. And so
Yeah.
that ushered in my ability to take all of these things and look at them. And so to really understand, like, I heard the word narcissist thrown at me so many times, in my younger years, by my ex-wife, even, calling me that. Well, what does that mean? Am I that? And so, to get the help I need, I was pleased. Like, I don't struggle in that area, but I know why people use it. And so I learned a whole lot about narcissistic behavior because I was a victim of that for so long.
Right.
And so that in a lot of ways denied me the ability, like step 9, like I really wanted an opportunity to sit down and to have a some closure, to have that moment with my ex where we're still parents of 3 beautiful, amazing children. Like, I wanted to at least reach out and say, here's where I screwed up. Will you forgive me? And that was not, she's not interested. So there's nothing I can do about it.
Sure.
But it's helped me live my life. I think not take myself so darn seriously. I think that's got me really, really far in life. Um, it When we don't take things personally and feel attacked all the time, when we're confident in who we are, confident in all the things we've done, even the bad things we've done. Like, it frees us to just exist and to have more gratitude, and to not really have those urges for the drink or the mood altering whatever. It's I don't have anything to cope about anymore.
Right.
And I'm not so naive to think that that couldn't happen tomorrow, right? Like, one day at a time literally means today I choose not to.
Wow.
Um, but I
You.
don't have those reasons. I'm no longer a victim, I guess. That paradigm shift for me happened on the boat going across the Gulf, where I transitioned from being a victim to being a guy who wanted to take personal responsibility for all of my things that were inferior or wrong or unhealthy.
That is what we call a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can envision that. I mean, that's amazing. So what how do you start your day?
Oh, my days. So my patterns are a little, geographically, I'm in North Carolina now, so I'm relatively new here and I love it here. But for my days get started with God. I think that's the best way I can, whether it's getting up in the morning and going, and I love to watch the sunrise wherever I'm at. So if I can make that work that into my routine, I will. I love photography, and I'm a writer, so I have all these artistic, creative avenues that I like to use. And so when I start out my day, I really start out with God. I've learned this principle, probably a couple years ago, and I really put it into place. And I call it purposeful intention, or segmented intentionality, meaning whatever my task is for the day to start it, I want to do it well. And the next task, I want to do it well. And so I break it up into tasks. And I know that I've taken this approach where if something goes awry in task 4, which maybe that's task 4 is driving from home to work. Well, if some, guy cuts me off in traffic and I want to have road rage, which I think we're all capable of,
Mm.
I can't let whatever happens poorly in step 4 affect my step 5. And so I have this way of regrouping if something happens incorrectly. I literally want to sign my name at the end of every day knowing I've done it the very best I possibly can. And to do that without having such, like, I don't want to create this unjust sense of pressure on me. Like, we are going to screw up and I'm going to make mistakes, but what do I do with those? Am I quick to apologize? Am I humble enough to be approachable? Do the people in my circles, do they trust me that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do? Like, all of that starts in the very beginning of each day.
That's amazing.
And it's really relying on God. I read my Bible every day, so I'm going through a 1 year chronological, read through the Bible in a year. I'm about 6 months through that. I've probably stuck with this longer than I ever have before. I've always had these grand aspirations of I'm going to read the Bible in a year, and I always fizzle out. And so I'm doing that this year, and it's making a huge difference. It's who I surround myself with. It's my circle. It's the people in my life. Do they make me better, or is my circle just a cage? Am I in a cage or am I free? And so I've worked really hard to kind of weed out the people in my life who weren't a good influence. I'm very, very particular about who I give my time to, because I'd rather spend time alone and productive than to waste my time on things that don't really matter. I try to weigh everything I do in life through the lens of how does it affect my future self?
Mm.
And
Wow.
is it good? Is it good? Is it negative? Or is it indifferent? And sometimes we'll take those indifference, right? That's kind of what makes the world go round. And it sometimes those are really important, but I don't want the negative. And so with the negative people and drama, I've had to cut some people out of my life that I never thought I would. And it's been very liberating to me. And I don't take it personally. I'm not keeping score. I'm not holding a grudge. It's just simply like, you're not good for me in my life. And instead of getting angry or trying to control others, I just accept people for who they are. And if it meshes with me and being healthy, then that's even better.
Right. Well, that's
I don't know if that
amazing.
makes sense,
No, it
but
totally makes sense. Yeah, separating with love. I mean, you can excuse someone from your life without having resentments, and you can wish them well, and on their journey as you continue on yours. So yeah, that makes total sense. Well, I am so grateful that you decided to come on with me. I this has been a I'm real excited where this podcast is going, and trying to just be the hand of hope out there for the person who still suffers. So I'm very grateful to you.
I am too. I had mentioned to you earlier when we spoke, like, God has blessed me with some opportunities in the future. Like, one of those is to write a book, to write a novel, and I'm in the process of that. So I would love to come back and share that goal, that vision with you all
Absolutely.
some point. I think there's just some really amazing life lessons that we learned in this progress and this through the journey, right? And
Hmm.
for me, one of those was, I never realized what love was until I realized what it wasn't.
Oh wow.
And so, like, that affects my relationships with other people, whether they're friends, family, my kids, people that I might, have a romantic relationship with. I'm not in a relationship with anyone now, but like, it affects the way we think about those things.
Hmm.
And like, I've said this to so many people, like, I'd rather be alone the rest of my life and be who I am than to compromise the things that I've learned just to suit someone else. And I
Oh,
think the right
absolutely.
person's out there. Like, I think God will bless us with, like, where you don't have to work so hard. But for me, it's just a matter of, like, being healthy on a daily basis. it's making little changes. It's, and so for me, one of the greatest was to, like, I just don't drink. And I've taken the steps of AA and I've applied those to my life. And how can I now share those with others? Like, it's a great program. And I think for me, there's more to my life than just the program, though.
Right.
I have to I have to take it another step with my higher power, with, the things in my life that, to me, AA is not, it's not just a cult, so to speak. And I know a lot of people call it that. I mean, I don't think that's fair, but for me, it works really well with other things as well. And so that's why I'm hoping that, maybe somebody out there can, like, there's hope. As bad as we think it is, things can always be better.
They can
And
always be
usually
better.
it starts within. It starts from the way we view ourselves. So, um,
Well, that is
yeah,
amazing. That is amazing. I'm so glad you're sober.
me too.
I bet you are.
Me too.
All right. Well, that is our time. And Chad from North Carolina, thank you so, so much. I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for
Hey,
you.
Kristen,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry.
No,
Do you mind if I just give a real quick shout out to a couple people?
sure.
Yeah. This journey has been such a blessing to me. Obviously my kids, my three kids, Andy, Ray Ray, and Tirza, I love you. But there's been people in my life in this journey, Katie and Jeremy and Kelly and Jeff and Anna, Jason, Steven, my mom and my dad, Lindsay, like all of you. You just have made my life so much better being part of this journey. So I just wanted to give that shout out to the people who are the most important to me.
That's amazing. And from at least what I hear you saying, most importantly is a God that loves us and uh, at least for me as well, keeps me sober every day.
Amen.
All right. I'm grateful to you. Thank you so much for listening to Purpose Driven Sobriety, and keep coming back. Thanks for listening to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Keep coming back.